Saturn is going retrograde. This is a major event, and it may feel that something is coming to a standstill, that it can't go any further. My name is Archie Dunlop. This is Talking Astrology with Archie, and in this video I'm going to be talking about the weekend of July the 25th and 26th, 2026. I'll start this video by giving an overall view of the astrology of the weekend. I will be focusing on Saturn going stationary retrograde, and then I will do a forecast for the 12 signs before doing an I Ching reading for the weekend. So let's start off by looking at the broad astrology of the weekend. Here is a chart set for midnight on July the 26th, New York time. So this chart is really halfway through the weekend, and the moon is at 25 degrees Sagittarius. So, for all of Saturday, the moon is in Sagittarius, and then on Sunday, the moon moves into Capricorn. It moves into Capricorn at 2:44 in the afternoon in London. So, on Sunday afternoon in Europe and Africa, moon moves out of Sagittarius and into Capricorn. If you're in the Americas, that will be sort of Sunday morning. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, it might not be until very early on Monday that the moon moves into Capricorn. Now, the moon on Saturdays going through Sagittarius, and it's doing quite a lot. The moon we're just finishing off with a grand trine. So if you watch my video for yesterday, Friday, you'll remember that I was talking about a grand trine. The moon in Sagittarius was making a trine to the Sun-Jupiter conjunction in Leo. It was also making a trine to Neptune in Aries. But now this grand trine kind of finishes off, because the moon, the beginning of the weekend, moves on and makes a trine to Saturn. And, Saturn is the planet of discipline, control, organization. And, when you've got a grand trine in fire signs, that can be all over the place. It can have a certain lack of discipline. I mean, it can be fun, but it might be out of control, and then there's always a danger when you're talking about fire. It can fizzle out. And so maybe Saturn's role is to take control of something that is dynamic, but if you don't take control of it, it just might just die. It might just not happen. And so perhaps Saturn, being the ruler of time, can take an exciting situation and turn it into something more permanent. So there is a role for Saturn here which is not destructive. It can actually make something last longer, and can make it perhaps a sort of a more permanent part of our lives. And the moon moves on, and the moon does start to make a conjunction with true black moon Lilith. It makes a square to Venus, and it makes an opposition to Mars. So we have a T-square on Saturday, and this T-square really links up with the Venus-Mars square. So Venus and Mars are moving to a square aspect. At the beginning of next week, Venus and Mars are in exact square. So, when you think about Venus and Mars, well, you could say that has a lot to do with relationships and the way people are attracted to one another. Also, the way people are repulsed. I mean, that's the Venus-Mars connection. It can be an irrational attraction, but sometimes it can be the opposite. And so with moon square Venus, moon square moon opposition Mars, it's certainly very dynamic, and it can be dynamic in terms of the way people relate to one another, but it can release quite a lot, and one might get powerful instinctual feelings about certain people. Those feelings, they could be about attraction, but at the same time they could also be about repulsion. And the moon, the fact that the moon is conjunct true black moon Lilith, that kind of adds to things. I mean, true black moon Lilith represents things which are kind of dark and under the surface, and when people relate to one another, especially on an emotional level, things can get dark, and there can be sort of trapped feelings get released, and that might be partially connected with true black moon Lilith. So it's quite a potentially dangerous T-square, particularly from a perspective of relationships. But we should be looking to Venus perhaps for the resolution. I mean, that's how I like to see T-squares. You have two planets which are opposition one another. In this case, you've got Moon conjunct true black moon Lilith opposition Mars, and that is the conflict. And Venus might appear to be adding to the conflict, but Venus might also be resolving the conflict as well. So Venus in Virgo, you could say, is about being pleasant and being reasonable, and because it's in Virgo, trying to make sense of the situation. Venus in an Earth sign, things can get very verbal. Things can get a little bit out of control, and when you got with Venus here, it's Venus can just say, well, actually, what is it really about? Let's get down to basics. What are we really worried about? And from a material point of view, what is at stake? And it could be that Venus, through a sensible approach, can, to some extent, resolve the issue. So that's quite an important event, going on over the weekend. And additionally, we have a sextile between Neptune and Pluto. Well, the Neptune-Pluto sextile is exact. And this next Neptune sextile Pluto is, well, you could say, well, so what? Neptune sextile Pluto, probably all of you listening to me have got Neptune sextile Pluto. It's just an aspect which has just dominated proceedings since the middle of the 20th century. And when I was doing charts by hand, because when I first started learning astrology, I do my charts by hand, and it was quite a laborious process. But what you would have to do is you would fill in the aspect grid, and again you'd have to do it by hand, and you'd have to. So what I think is, dog is barking. The reason the dog is barking is probably because the dog is looking out, and what is it watching? It's watching a puppy getting fed, because that's the thing is we just got a second dog, and the second dog is 4 months old. Our dog is same breed, Slovensky Chuvach, and probably it's just not happy about seeing a puppy out there being fed, being exercised, or whatever. It's just doesn't like that situation, and so that thing. We do have. I haven't mentioned that we do have a second dog. The second dog is called Imrich. Imrich, and Imrich is a Pisces, sun in Pisces with the moon in Aries, and it's a he. It's a male dog. Anyway, I'm sure I'll be talking about Imrich more in my videos when he becomes more of a feature. Anyway, sorry about that. This aspect grid. So you'd fill in this aspect grid by hand, and you would you would just have to work out the aspects by hand. You'd look at the ephemeris, and always Neptune Pluto, you just always put a sextile mark, that snowflake thing where you put sextiles. That's just always there. And so big deal with a Neptune sextile Pluto. But I think this Neptune sextile Pluto does matter, not least because it is exact. It is exact this weekend. And it's part of a wider configuration. It's part of Uranus is sextile. Uranus is sextile Neptune. Uranus is trine Pluto. Jupiter is likewise involved. Jupiter's sextile Uranus and so forth, and Jupiter's trine Neptune. So it's all part of this supposed Barbo's basket that a lot of astrologers are talking about. Is Barbo's basket really working? I don't know. We perhaps see this weekend the sun is at 4 degrees Leo at the end of a weekend and into next week. So maybe that's another chance to see this basket at work. Hopefully, I don't know. I kind of have my doubts a bit. I think a lot of people have been talking about Barbo's basket, and because it's just something to talk about. It sounds exciting, but maybe it's just this week's news. Anyway, the point is about Neptune sextile Pluto is, I think it is an important aspect. It's quite a difficult aspect to understand, to put together. Because you've got Pluto. Pluto's a planet of transformation. Neptune is a planet of dissolution, of becoming part of something else. And so you say that Neptune sextile Pluto, it might be that this is a generation of people who want to be part of something else, part of some ideal, but at the same time they want to hold on to their own interest. Pluto, where is me in here? Pluto wants to perhaps transform in a very sort of personal way. So it could be that Neptune sextile Pluto is about maybe protesting about things, wanting to change society, but always keeping in mind one's own power. And I think that this is just something I can't help noticing when you look at activists, certainly where I am. They're all into their activism, but it's all about them as well. And so there is a certain selfishness to certainly political activism, and because it's all about them, it just doesn't get anywhere. There are limits to it, and maybe there's a different way of looking at it. But we are trying to transform something. We're trying to become part of something beyond ourselves, but we are wanting to do it in a dramatic way, and at the same time we are looking after our own interests. But I need to perhaps give this Neptune sextile Pluto a little more thought. And this Neptune sextile Pluto is taking place at the same time as Mars sesquiquadrate Pluto. So Mars sesquiquadrate Pluto, that is an aspect which is, it's certainly about power. It's about wanting to stay in power, being very aware of who has the power, and taking any opportunity to assert oneself. But with Mars semi-sesquiquadrate Pluto, it can kind of work both ways. We might be concerned about our power, but we might also be thinking about other people's power. How much power do people have over us? We might therefore feel that we have to really, really look after our own interests, and it may just feel that something has to give, that things have just gone on for too long, and we might decide that it's time to really deal with things and deal with them in a sort of a head-on kind of way. But Pluto is an aspect that that can make things explode, but it can also hide things. So one way of looking at Mars sesquiquadrate Pluto is about the massive assertion of one's power. But Pluto can say, oh, I'm afraid of using my power. So some people might respond to Mars sesquiquadrate Pluto by just keeping their power to themselves, or even feeling that they are powerless. Now, this Mars-Pluto sesquiquadrate links with Neptune, because Neptune is sextile. Because Neptune is sextile Pluto. So we can see the Neptune sextile. We can see Pluto sesquiquadrate Mars, but what is the connection between Mars and Neptune? Is there an aspect between Mars and Neptune? Yes, there is an aspect between Mars and Neptune, but it's a micro aspect. Mars is at 1906 Gemini. Neptune is at 4 degrees 19 Aries. So if you add 15 to 4 degrees 19, you get to 1919. So that's telling us that there is an aspect between Neptune and Mars on the 15-degree series of aspects, semi-sextiles. And if we want to see these aspects, which are a 24th harmonic aspect, because 15 degrees is 24th of a circle. So that means that a 15-degree aspect will be shown as an opposition on a 12th harmonic chart. So if we look at the 12th harmonic, which basically means we take all of the positions of the planets in absolute longitude and we multiply them all by 12. And then we convert the planets to absolute longitude, multiply by 12, and then successively subtract by 360 until we get to an absolute longitude below 360. Then we convert to degrees, to signs, degrees, and minutes. And so here is the 12th harmonic of the weekend's planets, and hopefully you'll then be able to see what I mean. So from a 12th harmonic perspective, so there is Neptune, Pluto. There's Neptune and Pluto shown as a conjunction, because on the 12th harmonic, a sextile will be shown as a conjunction, and there is Mars. There's that 15-degree aspect shown as an opposition. So Mars, that sort of energetic planet, looking for action, looking to make things happen, it is opposition Neptune and Pluto. So on the 12th harmonic, Mars is struggling to make sense of the collective power of Neptune and Pluto. I've already talked about Mars, Pluto being concerned about power, and Mars opposition Neptune on the 12th harmonic. It's sometimes difficult. It's kind of overwhelming. We're dealing with collective energies which might just seem beyond us. And Mars, Neptune. Of course, we're thinking about oil. The price of oil is going crazy, isn't it? At the time of Neptune sextile Pluto. So that's actually another way, on a more mundane level, of which this Neptune sextile Pluto is working, and then Mars is coming in. So maybe this is talking about oil, the Straits of Hormuz, the oil price, the oil crisis, and so forth. But on an individual level, it is what we are struggling for, and we're struggling to make sense of this collective energy that we can symbolize as a sextile between Neptune and Pluto. And so there's quite a lot going on this weekend, and I should say that the weekend does end with the moon in Capricorn. Okay, unless you're in Australia or New Zealand, so it might not be until early on Monday that the moon goes into Capricorn. Before I look at Saturn going direct, because that is Saturn going stationary retrograde, I just want to firstly just quickly look at the positions of the planets in Sydney, Australia, as a representative of Australasia before I look at the heliocentric chart. If you are in Australia or New Zealand, then right in the middle of the weekend, the moon is at 18 degrees at 18 degrees Sagittarius, and it's exactly opposition Mars and square Venus. So I don't know. That means if you are in Australasia, then I don't know, if you're going to a party on Saturday night, particularly if a party goes on late, you're going to have the full power of that Moon, Mars, Venus T-square. It will be at its maximum. I mean, that might be fun, but it could certainly be challenging. And so if you're concerned about bad things going on, if you're of a nervous disposition and you are in Australasia or East Asia, then maybe you should stay at home. And then there is the heliocentric picture, putting the Earth at putting the Sun at the center of a solar system. So you can see that the Earth is moving towards a conjunction of Pluto and an opposition of Jupiter. This is just a repeat of what we've got geocentrically, because geocentrically the Sun is making an opposition to Pluto, and it's making a conjunction to Jupiter. So it's kind of just telling us what we already know. And we also have the Earth sextile Neptune. Does that say something about oil and what people are talking about now? That oil is, what is oil at $100 a barrel? I haven't looked at the oil. I haven't looked at the markets. I mean, I'm making this video on Friday. I haven't really looked at what's going on this morning. And then there is Saturn direct. So here is Saturn retrograde. Here's the chart of Saturn going retrograde, the precise moment. So Saturn goes retrograde at 8:56:29 on Sunday evening London time. I mean, I think I've got it down to the second because I get that from astro.com and the ephemerides on astro.com. So I've just read off the exact time that Saturn goes stationary retrograde, converting it to British summertime. So, we do need to think about what does that mean? Indeed, does it mean anything? I mean, part of the problem of doing videos, this kind of video, is, you see an astrological event and you have to say something about it. And perhaps you're over dramatizing it. I mean, the reality is Saturn goes retrograde every year and life goes on. And it stays retrograde for a long time. So, Saturn goes retrograde on July the 26th. It stays retrograde until December the 10th. I mean, that is a huge chunk of time. And so maybe just talking about it is just it's just creating meaning out of nothing. So I think we need to be aware of that. On the other hand, we have to think about perhaps what it means. So Saturn went into Aries on February the 14th, Valentine's Day, and it really went through Aries pretty quickly. It went through almost half the sign before coming to a standstill at 14 degrees 45. And so that might be a time of sort of rapid change, rapid development, things moving quickly. Certainly things have moved quickly in some respects. I mean, you look at the UK. I mean, we've got a new Prime Minister. We've had all of the Mandelson stuff and crisis in the British government, and just the whole British government, or at least Keir Starmer, his premiership collapsing. It all happened so quickly. Andy Burnham gets a seat in the House of Commons, and he's Prime Minister, and we're only in the first 7 months of the year. Or likewise, you've got Iran, and Trump attacks Iran, Trump and Israel, US and Israel attack Iran on February the 28th. And so look at all the stuff that's happened so quickly, around the world. Maybe Saturn going through the first half of Aries. Saturn, Aries, people wanted action, but it was tough action and it was difficult. And now that Saturn is going stationary direct, perhaps people are just questioning, what was it all about? And how are we going to return to normality? And maybe that's going to tell us something about Saturn going retrograde until December the 10th or 11th of this year. And so, that might be, one way in which Saturn retrograde worked. And for ourselves, on an individual basis, it might be about us feeling that things have gone too far, that we need some breathing space, and that we need to kind of perhaps pause what we're doing. Maybe there'll be a forced pause. Maybe there's something we really want to get going on, Saturn in Aries, but we realize it's not going to happen, and we're going to at least have to wait until December, wait until Saturn goes direct. And when you're dealing with Saturn going going retrograde, it's important to consider the precise moment. For a precise moment, like this chart is set. What is Saturn doing at the moment it goes to stationary retrograde? So Saturn went stationary retrograde just a couple of days after Mercury went stationary direct. And this happens with Saturn and Mercury both being in square to each other. So you've got a Mercury-Saturn square. And if you think about Mercury-Saturn square, this kind of tells us that we are in a time of worry. That's Mercury. Mercury is the way we think, the way all of us think. And I think a lot of us are worried. A lot of people are worried in the world. What is going to happen? Now, this Mercury square Saturn, it doesn't become exact because Mercury is now going forward, Saturn's going retrograde, so Mercury will soon start to move away from that square to Saturn. But right now, Mercury is stationary and Saturn are stationary, and they're in square to one another. So you can see why there is so much concern and so much worry around it. So that does make sense, and people thinking that maybe things are going to get worse. Well, you could say though, but if everyone thinks that things are going to get worse, then you've got to be a contrarian. Maybe it's the opposite. And we shouldn't forget that Jupiter, over the course of August, is starting to make a trine to Saturn. And, by the end of August, you've got an exact trine between Jupiter and Saturn. So maybe things aren't quite as bad as they seem. And so when we're also looking at Saturn going stationary direct, we should think about, what midpoints is Saturn on? Because that might give us some added information. So let's look at the 90-degree dial. And so there is Saturn. So the closest midpoint that Saturn is on is the Neptune-Zeus midpoint. Zeus is a hypothetical planet, and it's kind of rather like Jupiter, but it's a kind of the active, random side of Jupiter. Jupiter suddenly making an appearance. It's rather thunderous. Zeus is a planet that is often associated with explosions and gunshots. Sudden action. And so Neptune Zeus, you can see how Neptune Zeus can be quite dangerous, because Neptune Zeus could be taking action without fully knowing what one is doing. It could be like, action which is mistaken, based on a fantasy, based on an illusion. And Saturn on a Neptune Zeus midpoint is about maybe the realization that one has done something really stupid. Or it could be the act of doing something stupid. Or having the consequences of doing something stupid. And so we ourselves, as individuals, with Saturn going retrograde, need to be, or Saturn, particularly Saturn going stationary direct, need to be very, very careful about taking the initiative, particularly initiatives which are unplanned and are spontaneous, because those spontaneous initiatives could be based on false information and they could go badly wrong. That is Saturn. And, as individuals, we do have a choice. But in terms of the world and politicians, and you can think about Iran. I mean, that kind of what's going on in Iran is I find it absolutely incomprehensible about Iran. I mean, I just can't help thinking about Iran. I mean, because this is this is an impossible position that America has found itself in, because it attacked Iran on February 28th with the expectation that it would be able to, I think, bring the government down pretty quickly. And they've just discovered that Iran is able to fight back. They've been shocked at how much how effective Iran has been. They almost seem to be surprised that Russia and China, particularly Russia, has been giving Iran help and giving them even targeting information. But hold on, why wouldn't Russia give them targeting information? After all, the United States has been giving Ukraine targeting information regarding Russian targets, so it's kind of not surprising that the Russians have returned the favor. So it is a big mess, and also you've got Neptune. You think about this aspect, Neptune Zeus. Neptune Zeus is taking action without thinking it through. I mean, that's kind of what it is, what it could be. Action regarding oil, Neptune, and then Saturn is having to deal with the consequences. And so I think that you could say that Saturn is about the US having to deal with the consequences of what it's done, and it realizing it's a really difficult situation. Saturn, and particularly Saturn, is stationary direct. So stationary retrograde, and because Saturn is stationary retrograde, this midpoint, Saturn on the Neptune Zeus midpoint, it's just going to hang around. It's going to hang around for a long time, a relatively long time. I think we've kind of got our answer if we want to know how that particular midpoint is working. But it may not apply just to Iran. It may be to any area in public life, global life, where people are trying to do something, particularly if they're trying to resolve something quickly through a spur of a moment activity. It's just, in many cases, just not going to work. I mean, there are other midpoints involved. It's actually on the Moon's Zeus midpoint as well. It's on the the Moon's Zeus and the Neptune's Zeus midpoint. So I think that sort of adds to the thing. So because we've got a Moon Neptune, what is it? We've got at the time of Saturn going stationary direct, we have a Moon Neptune square. Is that right? Moon in Capricorn square Neptune in Aries. So we've got the Moon Neptune square on one hand, we've got Zeus on the other. So it's just taking action without really thinking it through, and then having to deal with the consequences. Saturn suggesting that things are not going to work well. And I did finally want to look at a few people who may be impacted by this Saturn going stationary direct. We'll probably never know, but Tony Blair, for example, former British Prime Minister, he has his Venus at 15 degrees 1 Aries. So Tony Blair is going to have Saturn going stationary retrograde on his Venus, and that may say something about how he's feeling. He may not be feeling too good. Tony Blair might be feeling quite depressed at the moment. Maybe things aren't working out for him. I mean, he may be pleased that Starmer is no longer British Prime Minister, but there's something bothering him, and I doubt that he's in sort of good spirits. Could it be something to do with his life, his private life, his health? I mean, there's some possibility there. So Tony Blair might be someone to look out for. And then there is, I noticed Jordan Peterson. So here's a chart of Jordan Peterson. I mean, he obviously has, the psychologist who's, all over YouTube. And Jordan Peterson has his moon at 14 degrees 23 Libra. So he's going to have Saturn opposition his moon. And so, Saturn opposition moon. I mean, I don't really have anything to say about Jordan Peterson. I'm just kind of pointing out. Maybe, like Tony Blair, for one reason or another, he's not going to be too happy about the way things are unfolding. Maybe it's just something bothering him. Maybe it's a health issue. So that's just something I noticed. And then there is some characters around the whole Ukraine issue. There is Ursula von der Leyen. Here is her horoscope. So Ursula von der Leyen, she is, what's her title? She's, head of the EU. What do they call her? Head of the EU Council or whatever her title is. It sort of escaped me right now. So Ursula von der Leyen, I don't have a time of birth of Ursula von der Leyen. I do have a date of birth. So Ursula von der Leyen has her sun at 14 degrees 39 Aries. So it's 14 degrees 39 Libra. So she has got, and Mercury at 1651 Libra. So she has got Mercury square her Mercury, and she's got Saturn opposition her Sun. So this might be Saturn stationary retrograde opposition her Sun. So she may not be in great spirits. And the Sun, being a male planet, may represent the men in her life. There are a lot of men in her life, after all. I mean, all these sort of politicians she has to deal with, but maybe it represents Zelensky, I don't know. But Saturn opposition her sun in Libra, there is something really weighing in on her. I mean, she's not happy. Maybe she's not happy at the way things are going on in the world. Maybe she's not happy about what is happening in the Ukraine. And one person who definitely has been impacted by Saturn going stationary direct, even before it went stationary direct, was General Siersky. So General Siersky was, until a few days ago, the head of the Ukrainian army, and he got fired and replaced with can't remember the man's name, but Siersky has his Mars at 14 degrees 47 Libra. So Saturn was exactly opposition his Mars when he got fired as head of the Ukrainian army. So QED, nothing more needs to be said about that. That really is Saturn in action. And then other Ukrainian personalities and events. Zelensky was inaugurated, I believe, at 10 a.m. on May the 20th, 2019. So Zelensky is, of course, the president of Ukraine. Maybe that time is not right. If that time is right, then the midheaven of his inauguration is 14 degrees 18 Aries. So Saturn went stationary direct on the midheaven of his inauguration chart. And that may be a new problem for him. We know his presidency, it's been under pressure for years, but he's still in power. But we've had sort of past struggles. He's had to let go of Sierski, and there's been issues about the defense minister going, what's his name, Fedorov. People in the West thought he was doing really well with his drone offensive. Apparently the drone offensive isn't actually quite as good as some people are suggesting. But so he had to fire Fedorov, maybe, because, with Zelensky, he is an Aquarius. Like, he's got all those planets in Aquarius. And so, the opposite sign to Aquarius is Leo. And so that Leo energy in his chart is perhaps really coming to the fore, and because he's got Mars in Leo, and he really wants to stay in power, and he doesn't like it when other people are getting too much favorable attention. Like Zaluzhny got fired as commander-in-chief of the army, and he got shunted off to be ambassador in London, and so this is now that Saturn is on Aries. Maybe that's a couple of sackings too much to sack the commander-in-chief of your army plus your defense minister in the space of a week. That might be quite undermining for him. And there is one Ukrainian politician who does keep showing up, and I have no idea what she's doing. I mean, she was, whatever, the heroine of the Orange Revolution in 2004. That's Yulia Tymoshenko. But Yulia Tymoshenko has a Venus-Saturn conjunction in her horoscope, Venus at 1415 Capricorn. So Saturn in Aries will be making a square to her Venus-Saturn conjunction. And Saturn can work in many different ways. It needn't necessarily be a problem. Maybe Saturn will mean that she finds some way of gaining prominence. I mean, she absolutely has not gone away. She still makes her presence felt, and so she is still an important figure in Ukrainian politics. And maybe Saturn square her Venus and square her Saturn will have some effect on her. And then and finally, there is Mark Carney, Prime Minister of Canada. Mark Carney has his midheaven at 14 degrees 50 Capricorn. So Mark Carney has Saturn moving through his 12th house, making an exact square to his midheaven. And Saturn being stationary retrograde, it's going to stay there for some time. So that may say something about his government and what he's trying to deal with. Hasn't Trump just announced, is it 50% tariffs on Canada or something like that? Anyway, there's always something to deal with. So Mark Carney might be someone to watch. So those are some thoughts on Saturn being stationary retrograde. I think potentially it is quite an important event, especially as it's aspecting the what is it? It's the Neptune Zeus midpoint. And now I want to look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of July the 25th and 26th, 2026. Aries. For most of the weekend, the moon is moving through Sagittarius. And so with the moon in Sagittarius, there are plenty of things to do, plenty of ways to enjoy yourself. And I think you're still feeling that grand trine energy. So in my video for Friday, I talked about a grand trine, when we had the moon in Sagittarius, trining the sun and Jupiter in Leo, and trining Neptune in Aries. And, that was a really sort of energetic configuration. And, right at the beginning of a weekend, the moon is making a trine to Saturn. And that trine to Saturn, was, the completion of the grand trine. And perhaps it allowed you to sort of get things together and perhaps to take something that was, exciting and sort of bring it down to earth, make it perhaps part of your daily life. And so, that is how the weekend starts. But then Moon in Sagittarius does move on, and it makes a square to Venus and an opposition to Mars. So Moon in Sagittarius, square Venus, opposition Mars. They're quite dynamic aspects, but they could be troublesome. Especially as Mars is making a sesquiquadrate to Pluto over the weekend. So Mars sesquiquadrate Pluto, it's quite a powerful aspect. It makes you very aware of your power, and also, I think, aware of the constraints on your power. And so you might really kind of want to look after yourself, and perhaps take any opportunity to assert yourself. But it is just possible that you go maybe a little bit too far. I mean, that could happen because you're taking things too seriously. And when we think about the Moon opposition Mars and square Venus, Venus and Mars are in square. So, we've got, Venus at 17 Virgo, Mars at 19 degrees Gemini. So I think early next week we have an exact square between Venus and Mars. And, that might say something about relationships. After all, Mars is your ruler, Venus is square Mars. So there could be a difference of opinion, or perhaps you and someone else have a different approach. If I were to speculate about that difference of approach, I would have said that you are perhaps, quite forward-looking. You're wanting things to happen. You perhaps are looking for variety. Perhaps you want to create some change, or do several things at once even. But then Venus is in Virgo, and so Venus in Virgo might describe another person's attitude, a person who is cautious, who perhaps likes to do things by the book, wants to make sure that everything is in order. And there's you coming along, and from another person's perspective, you could be disruptive or difficult, or just coming up with ideas that are not practical or are not suitable. So think about that dynamic. Now, I'm not suggesting that you have to give in to another person who is perhaps more sensible for you, perhaps more boring for you. I mean, sorry, I'm not saying you're boring at all. So compared to you, this other person might seem boring, doing things by the book, and that's absolutely not what you want. And I don't think right now, Aries, you're especially in the mood for backing down. So once you've decided on a course of action, you're going to want to see it through. And it goes back to what I was saying about that Mars sesquiquadrate Pluto. Yeah, it's a powerful aspect, and this Mars sesquiquadrate Pluto does link up with Neptune, because one of the aspects we have over the weekend is a sextile between Neptune and Pluto. Now, Neptune and Pluto are always in sextile. I mean, what's the big deal? I mean, Neptune and Pluto have been in sextile for the last, 70 years. And so, we've got Neptune in Aries, sextile Pluto in Aquarius. But you are picking up on this. And, it's like I was saying in the introduction to this video, that from a sort of harmonic angle, that aspect, is strong. Let me just remind you of this harmonic picture. So if I create a 12th harmonic chart, let me just remind you of what I showed at the beginning. So if we create this 12th harmonic chart, which means basically multiplying all the numbers by 12. So it's a slightly different chart, but there is Mars making an opposition to Neptune and Pluto. In other words, making a 12th harmonic opposition to Neptune and Pluto. So look like that, it seems really quite dramatic. You're really aware of high-level cosmic forces represented by Neptune and Pluto for a start, and Pluto is driving you forward, and it might be that you have a vision. You have a vision that you're very aware of. You know that it is possible, and the last thing you want is anyone holding you back, and that might be how some Arians see it. You see yourself as being an innovator who's got something, really quite important to contribute, and it is about your originality. But there are things holding you back, and it could be people, but that's just not something you want to have to worry about, and you are really challenged to understand what is happening. But maybe Aries, if things aren't going your way, if you do come up against resistance, rather than blame other people, perhaps you should look at it as sort of more of a cosmic struggle. You are being told something. You're being made aware of something in the cosmos, something that wants to be developed in the cosmos, something that is trying to come down to Earth, represented by that Neptune-Pluto sextile. And it's not easy. You have to find a way of making it real. And additionally, this might be what Saturn Retrograde Saturn Stationary Direct is concerned about. Because Saturn does go stationary direct this weekend, and that I think is important. And Saturn has been moving through your sign, and so with Saturn Stationary Direct, you are being reminded of something, in a big way. You're being reminded of your responsibility, and I think it's easy to see retrograde motion as being about having to go back on something and having to delay something. But an alternative view of a retrograde is to say this planet is extra powerful because it stays where it is, and Saturn is not going away. It has come to a standstill, and it kind of demands attention. And deep down, Aries, with Saturn stationary direct, I think you actually understand what it is that you are really supposed to be doing, because Saturn is moving through your sign. Saturn is right in the middle of your sign, and part of you is resisting, saying this is not for you, this is not something you want to do. And that might be a reason why you find certain people aggravating, because perhaps they're telling you something that deep down you already know. Now, on Sunday, we do get a lunar sign change. The moon moves out of Sagittarius and into Capricorn. And, that is, a bit of a change. And with Saturn moving into Capricorn, with the moon moving into Capricorn, I think that you become maybe more resigned to the situation. Capricorn is a responsible sign. It understands its responsibilities, and what you need to do. Also perhaps what you would like to do, and so as you move into the new week with the moon in Capricorn, I think that you do have a sense of purpose, but also a sense of responsibility. I think it might be a reluctant sense of responsibility, but maybe things are becoming clear, or at least clearer. And so there could be just a change at the end of a weekend when, in one sense, you slow down, but in another sense, you just accept what needs to be done. Taurus. For most of a weekend, the moon is moving through Sagittarius, and with the moon in Sagittarius, it might seem that things are just a little bit complicated. They're not completely easy to understand, and because of that, it might be difficult to entirely relax. There's always something going on, always something that needs to be considered, something that needs to be thought about, and even things which appear to be straightforward also seem to have other dimensions to them, and you can't just take things at face value, and that kind of relates to everything. It relates to people, whatever you might be involved with. Something seems simple, but you look at it and then you look at it again and it just becomes more and more complicated. And that does apply to relationships, even if relationships have been going on for some time, because the moon in Sagittarius, it makes a square to Venus, and it also makes an opposition to Mars. So we've got a T square here. So T square, and that T square involves you. It involves Venus. So the T square could seem like a struggle, and when you get close to people, particularly the important people of your life, maybe the problems start to become apparent. You realize that things aren't quite as easy as you thought. And so what's going on is that Venus and Mars were moving towards a square of one another, and early next week that square is exact. And so when you've got Venus and Mars making a square, you have a situation where potentially two people do not see eye to eye. They have maybe different priorities. So if Venus is in Virgo, that kind of represents you. That represents you trying to work things out, trying to make sense of things, and it's okay. I mean, you're getting there, and additionally, you're developing an idea of what you can do and what you can do well, and so it's all progressing at a good rate. But then you come across Mars, and Mars just might be another person, someone who might be close to you, but there's just something about them that you just find annoying. Maybe it's the things they say, or they could be unreliable, or at least appear to be unreliable. For example, someone wanting to do this, they want to do that, and it's just difficult to know what's going on. And so if you're dealing with people who seem, inconstant, always sort of moving from one place to another, one idea to another, that might annoy you. And this might particularly annoy you if there's any connection with money. So when people start talking about money or behaving in a way that you find is financially disturbing, then you might well react. And so it's not necessarily a case of blame, thinking you have to blame someone. Rather, just two people with different approaches, and the moon brings it all together, and you can start to see real complications. I mean, you don't want to exaggerate. You don't want to make things actually sort of more complicated than they are. But it just seems that that is happening because true Black Moon Lilith is involved. True Black Moon Lilith is is the moon is making a conjunction to true black moon Lilith. Venus is making a square to true black moon Lilith, and Mars is opposition true black moon Lilith. And so if you think about it, there's something going on, and something is going on which is actually, rather complicated, perhaps unnecessarily complicated, but, you just, don't like the feel of it. But it's important that you don't exaggerate, that, you don't jump to conclusions. I mean, Venus is your ruler. It is in Virgo. Virgo is a mutable sign, and so with mutability, you actually do have some flexibility. You can move from one place to another, and you don't have to be in the firing line if you don't want to be. So if you see a problem regarding other people, if you observe them and you kind of don't like the way things are going, then maybe it's just best to get out of the way and just do something else. If you don't want these kind of issues, if you don't want to have to deal with the complexity of human relationships, that is an option. Now, I've already talked about money, and because the moon is conjunct true black moon Lilith, opposition Mars across the finance axis of your chart, if you get involved with money, if money starts to become an issue, it could become a real issue. And that just might not be something you want to bother with. On the other hand, if you're ready to deal with a financial challenge, something has been building up and you've decided, well, you've got to face it, well, that is an option. And if you were to do that, I think it might actually be the right thing to do. I think that you can really get to grips with things and understand things which had been hidden. So it is up to you, but your ability to handle things which are complicated is actually quite good. I mean, it might not be much fun, but I really think that you can uncover some really quite important information. Now, late in the weekend, we have a change. We have the moon changing sign. We have the moon moving out of Sagittarius and into Capricorn. And the moon moving into Capricorn, I think, as far as you're concerned, is quite welcome. I mean, because moon in Sagittarius is just getting to perhaps be rather difficult, and it's just making things more complicated than they need to be. And so when the moon does move into Sagittarius, whenever that might be, it's quite early on Sunday if you're in the Americas, sort of Sunday morning, but in Europe it will be Sunday afternoon, Africa as well. And so when the moon moves into Capricorn, there are more possibilities. There are more possibilities to escape. And, if you don't want to do something, you finally find a way to get out of it. And you realize that things aren't quite as serious as they seem. So perhaps for most of the weekend, there has been a certain tendency to make things overly dramatic, to think that, really, this is the end of the world, this is really difficult, this is really complicated. And when the moon moves into Capricorn, it just becomes more obvious, and it's just not such a big deal. And that may just be because, the moon is moving into an earth sign. And, when the moon moves into an earth sign, things just come down to earth. And you realize that even very complicated issues just come down to a few basic facts, and it's not really very much to worry about. Gemini. The moon is in Sagittarius, certainly on Saturday, and for a big chunk of Sunday. And so, with the moon in Sagittarius, that can certainly say something about other people. I mean, Sagittarius is your opposite sign, And so with Moon in Sagittarius, there just might be people to deal with, and this might not necessarily be what you wanted, because the Moon in Sagittarius does make a few difficult aspects. It makes a conjunction to true Black Moon Lilith. It makes an opposition to Mars. It makes a square to Venus, and so it could be, Gemini, that where there's a person, there's a problem, or rather, where there's another person, there is a problem, and that might mean that you might be inclined towards a degree of isolation. Why not? If you're not having to worry about other people, maybe things just become a lot easier. But that might be an opportunity missed. With the Moon in Sagittarius making a conjunction to true Black Moon Lilith, this might give you an opportunity to understand people like never before. True Black Moon Lilith can be about other people's darkness, the things they are hiding, and if you make an effort to really understand what someone is like, then that can be enlightening, and it can also guide your future actions. So you may be able to work with other people's complexities, and that can certainly help. And especially if you're dealing with existing relationships, it's always good to understand what the other person is like, what they're really like. And at the moment, you're given access to this information. It might just be about being aware of other people's behavior, you've seen people behave in a particular way lots of times before, but now it's starting to make sense. And additionally, Gemini, it is a time to be honest with yourself, to ask, where does the fault lie? Where is the complication? Is it with you, or is it with someone else? And before seeing everything in terms of what another person is doing wrong, do think about your own contribution, because nothing happens in isolation. And perhaps the main lunar aspect, the most important one, is the opposition to Mars. So Moon opposition Mars, across the main horizontal of your chart, could be about you and your behavior. So Mars is going through your sign. So with Mars going through your sign, it can make you aggressive at times, or at least assertive. You want to stand up for your own interests. What is important to you. But then Moon opposition Mars, there is the possibility of a conflict. Perhaps a conflict with another person, and then you throw Venus into it. So you've got Moon opposition Mars, and then you've got Venus making a T-square. So we've had quite a lot of T-squares and grand trines recently. So it all seems to be happening, and so the T-square perhaps is suggestive of a solution. Maybe the solution is Venus in Virgo. So Venus in Virgo, it just might be that something needs to just come down to earth. Perhaps you've been you're taking something too seriously, or someone else has been taking something too seriously, and perhaps you're wrong to assume a conflict, and you need to really ground the whole thing, and ask yourself what is it about, and what it really is at issue. Venus in Virgo, it's in an earth sign, and maybe that's the question. What's actually at stake? And when you ask yourself what is at stake, and you're practical about it, you may realize that what's at stake is just not very much. And so, there's no point in just getting into a conflict for the sake of it, or even an unspoken conflict. When I talk about conflict, that seems a bit over dramatic, being sort of a literal argument or a fight or whatever. But it can be a conflict, in your own head. You can kind of look at other people and you can think that there is just a complete incompatibility, a complete difference of opinion, and what are you going to do about it? And when you actually get a perspective on the thing, then you might just realize that it's just not really worth the effort. And fundamentally, Gemini, what it might all be about is the fact that you want to have an impact, and it just might be as simple as that. And I think this might be connected with the fact that Mercury has just gone stationary direct very recently, and with Mercury pretty much still at a standstill. It's just not moving very much. You want to apply yourself. You want to apply yourself to the world. You want to apply your fundamental identity and self to the world, and it's not entirely easy. And you might feel frustrated and feel there are things going on that are just preventing you from being free. It could be money, just feeling that there's just something stupid, like not having enough money to do something, having to worry about how much money you've got in the bank, or something else. And that's kind of annoying, but it is your issue. It's not someone else's issue. So that is another reason why you shouldn't take it out on other people or see other people as being part of some larger problem. Instead, begin by taking responsibility, and also, yes, with the moon in Sagittarius, do make an effort to understand other people. You have a chance with the moon making a conjunction to true black moon Lilith to understand what is motivating other people. What's motivating them at a deeper level. And then that's at some stage this weekend the moon does change sign. It moves out of Sagittarius and it moves into Capricorn. And so when the moon moves into Capricorn, things remain a little bit up in the air with moon in Capricorn. You're not quite sure what's going on, but you know that there's been a change. And perhaps with the moon in Capricorn, you are seeing things more in terms of yourself rather than in terms of the other. And so as you move through Sunday, you perhaps have some serious thinking, and maybe you want to do your own research. You want to get to the bottom of things in your own way without anyone else disturbing you. Cancer. The weekend, you could say, is divided into two parts. There's a part of the weekend where the moon is in Sagittarius, and there's a part where the moon is in Capricorn. And the moon moves into Capricorn sometime on Sunday for most of us. If you're in the Americas, then very early in the morning on Sunday, the moon makes a change. I mean, it could be really early. It might be I don't know. It's something like 6 o'clock in the morning, 6:45 in the morning, I think in California. So there is this change, and as far as the Sagittarian bit is concerned, which is basically Saturday, it just could feel that on Saturday you are just engaged in various activities that in themselves aren't particularly amazing, but it just has to be done. And you have a good idea of what has to be done, and so it's probably important that no one gets in your way. I mean, if you know what you're doing and you know what needs to be organized, then Cancer, it just might be a question of just getting on with it. And Cancer, as I think I said yesterday, you have a vision of the way things should be organized. It's a very clear vision. So if you've got that vision, then you might as well just get on with it. And the weekend starts with a trine between the Moon and Saturn, and that Moon Saturn trine, I think, is really very useful. It allows you to really get things together, and get things together perhaps in terms of your work. If you have the opportunity, if you're working on Saturday, then I think that you will be very competent, very organized. You will really know what's going on, and at the same time you may be able to bring various strands together. So it could be that there are lots of things, lots of ideas, lots of activities going on, and Cancer, you can kind of make sense of it all. And so that moon trine Saturn is really the completion of a grand trine. So on Friday there was a grand trine in fire signs. The moon in Sagittarius making a trine to Neptune, making a trine to the Sun and Jupiter. It was quite an exciting configuration, perhaps a bit too exciting for your tastes, but you understood the way things were working. And then the final aspect to complete the grand trine was the moon making that trine to Saturn. And so you take a situation which is fast moving, which is not immediately easy to understand, but with that moon trine Saturn, you kind of bring it all together, and you create some organization and some structure. And that is certainly a good way to start the weekend. And through Saturday, it just might be best that you do things your way. I mean, if you've got an idea about the way things should unfold, then just stick with it. But the problem might be if you have to deal with complicated things, difficult things, and difficult people, because the moon is making an opposition to Mars and an opposition to and a square to Venus on Saturday. And so this might suggest that there are going to be distractors, and those distractors, they could be other people interfering. Moon square Venus might be a phone call, or someone trying to get in touch, someone trying to get your attention, and you don't really want to be bothered, but you might feel obliged, and that could disrupt your plans, and then that could make you annoyed. So disruption is something that should be avoided. But if disruptions do happen, you have to ask yourself, where do they actually come from? And they don't necessarily come from the outside world. With that moon opposition Mars, might be about something occurring to you that is annoying, but which you nonetheless might like to blame on someone else, or a group of people, or just something outside your control that is just making things difficult. But I think if you do find yourself feeling frustrated, that you can't do everything you want to do, I think before blaming anyone else, you should perhaps consider your own responsibility. Perhaps you are seeing something. You're becoming aware of something. Your intuition is telling you that there is another factor to be considered. But at the same time, you're resisting it. You don't want to consider it. You want things to be really straightforward, and you want to limit yourself to particular things. You don't want to bring in something new, but maybe that's what you have to do. And so it might be that as you try to create order around you. There's just something new that has to be integrated, and rather than fight it, you should just accept that there needs to be, a change of plan. And don't forget that the moon is making a conjunction to true black moon Lilith as well. So with the moon conjunct true black moon Lilith, it's important to be honest with yourself and to be honest about things that you might be hiding and not recognizing, about your own psychology. These things needn't be dangerous. They needn't be worrying, but they have to be addressed, perhaps, because it should all be about knowledge. We don't want to keep things hidden. We don't want to keep things hidden from ourselves. So there may be a situation where just something occurs to you that you don't want it to occur to you, but you're seeing a rather disturbing but interesting side to your own personality or something from the past, and it just might be worth considering because you are looking for wholeness, and I think that wholeness can, well, I'm not saying wholeness can be found, but you can certainly integrate a lot of very interesting things about yourself this weekend. And then the moon moves into Capricorn on Sunday, and the moon moving into Capricorn perhaps represents the second stage of a weekend, and the Capricorn is of course your opposite sign, and it does say something about other people, and perhaps there are people that you need to deal with that you don't necessarily want to deal with. The moon, when it moves into Capricorn, it actually makes a square to Neptune, and it might be that as you consider the various people around you, if you actually have to get on with them, engage with them, this could at first be quite confusing, and it might give you second thoughts. Was it really worth the effort? But moon square Neptune, it could be about other people being a confusing influence. You had things you wanted to do, and as soon as you talk to other people, it just makes things worse, and they distract you. But again, it may be another situation where you're being told something. You're being given information about yourself, and if you're not honest with yourself, then that honesty might have to come from some interaction, and so through that interaction you're perhaps being told something important. And continuing on the theme of other people, Saturn is stationary retrograde this weekend on Sunday, and Saturn is ruler of Capricorn. Capricorn is your opposite sign, and so with Saturn going stationary direct, that may say something about another person's behavior or another person's stance. Saturn going stationary retrograde could be about a person just stopping what they're doing. They're kind of in mid-action. They were ready to move, and they have a change of mind, and they're no longer prepared to commit themselves. Or it could be about another person's hesitancy. They're just not quite sure what to do next. And if anyone has made a commitment to you recently, a commitment that you had been taking quite seriously, or you thought they were going to honor a promise, then you shouldn't necessarily assume that promise will be honored, at least not immediately. And this might apply particularly if you are working. So if you have a job or a career, and someone has told you something, that something was going to happen, or perhaps a promise has been made to you, but a promise that doesn't necessarily have any guarantees. Then with Saturn going stationary direct, consider the possibility that that promise might just remain as potential, that promise might not be immediately honored. Not necessarily because anyone is lying to you, but just because the situation is changing. And so certain things just may be on hold, or certain people might be on hold as well. And it could be some time before you get movement again. In fact, it might not be until Saturn goes direct that you get clarity. So as far as when is Saturn going direct, I should have worked that out beforehand. So Saturn goes stationary direct today, and it goes retrograde until December. So it's just the last half of 2026 already. Just a reminder. So Saturn goes direct on the 10th of December. So I know that's a long time, but time flies. And so it is actually possible that something is put on hold until the end of the year, and that might just be unavoidable. It might also just say something about the rest of the year, that not everyone is able to honor their promises. And if you're thinking about authority figures, those authority figures might be people you respect in general. It could be people who are in control of things, people like managers, or could be politicians. But those kind of people are just going to have to stop what they were doing. Saturn is in Aries, so Saturn in Aries was about perhaps someone who was just ready to move forward with something, absolutely ready. Things were really moving, Saturn in Aries, but then suddenly Saturn couldn't go any further. Saturn just runs out of steam. And so just don't put too much store on in terms of what has been promised and what has been offered. And if you want something to happen, it may be down to you to just take responsibility. I mean, it's easy to think that someone else is going to sort it all out, but the one person who you can rely on is you yourself. And so, as far as is possible, perhaps you should take ownership of Saturn. So if there is going to have to be some kind of delay, make sure it's a delay that you have control of, that you have chosen. You might decide yourself that now is not the right time, that you do have to wait until the end of the year before you're ready to move forward with something. Maybe it's an idea or a project, or something you really want to do. So so don't panic if there is a delay. It will be resolved, I think, but it just may take longer than expected. Leo, the moon is in Sagittarius. It's in a fire sign. You're a fire sign. Like I said yesterday, there's a grand trine in fire, and the beginning of a weekend is when this grand trine in fire completes. So, in terms of this grand trine in fire that I did talk about yesterday, the Sun is, of course, in Leo, and so is Jupiter. The Sun is moving towards a conjunction of Jupiter. Yesterday on Friday, the moon in Sagittarius made a trine to the Sun and Jupiter. It also made a trine to Neptune, and so that was exciting. I hope there was, the possibility of real action, and it hopefully made you feel alive. But then there's a question of, were you able to complete it? Were you able to complete the action? And the weekend starts with the moon making a trine to Saturn, and that this moon trine Saturn does put things all together, and it allows you to finish something off and make something real. It's wonderful having ideas and there being sort of lots of excitement and so forth, but there's just a real danger that it just doesn't go anywhere. It's just a blast of energy which disappears as quickly as it arrived. And so with the moon trine Saturn, you have the discipline to make something a permanent part of your life, if that is what you want. And so on Saturday, the moon does continue moving through Sagittarius, and so there are, I think, things you enjoy doing. I think the average Leo is just going to want to just enjoy themselves. You should enjoy yourself. I mean, that's part of what life is all about. And don't have an entirely quiet and passive Saturday. But the moon does make a square to Venus and an opposition to Mars. And so, with those aspects, it could be that you run into resistance, and that resistance could come from, other people. When you think about enjoyment, how does one enjoy yourself? Well, one way of enjoying yourself is to be with other people, socialize, go to parties, and so on. But I don't think that this weekend is going to be particularly conducive to socializing. I mean, if you try to enjoy yourself in company, then I think you might be disappointed. You might even be annoyed. You might be of a view that other people are just not on your wavelength, and they could in some way just be in your way. And so if you want to enjoy yourself, it might be the case that it's just best done, on your own, or perhaps with one or two other people. I think as far as social problems are concerned, I think it's more about the group rather than just particular individuals. So if you're wondering, for example, whether to go to a party, probably the answer is no. I don't think that's necessarily going to work. I mean, it might work up to a point, but you just feel that you're not able to be yourself. And the moon also makes a square to Venus, because it makes so the moon makes a square to Venus, opposition to Mars, and moon square Venus. It could be about money. I mean, Venus has been moving through Virgo for some time, and there is a side to you, like it or not, that is wondering, what things cost and what your activities cost. And so it might be that there are things you want to do, but you're wondering how much they're going to cost, and it really wouldn't help if you're doing these things with other people, because of course other people can provide their own financial pressures, and you might not entirely approve of other people's attitude to money, or what people are saying about money, or what people are proposing about money. Perhaps other people have expensive ideas, and you yourself have your doubts. But it shouldn't be about money, but it just might be, and that just could be. It could be somewhat annoying. But if you are in a social situation and things are not going your way, don't underestimate your ability to create change. If you're not happy with the way things are going, you can assert yourself, not in a way that is violent or aggressive. You can just use your personality and your charisma, and you do that, and you'll get noticed. And if you make suggestions and you're ever so slightly uncompromising about it, but you kind of give the impression of being reasonable, then I think that you can actually have quite a powerful impact, and people will listen to you. So don't doubt your own social power. Now, at the end of a weekend, the moon changes sign. The moon moves into Capricorn. And with the moon moving into Capricorn, it could be that things do start to slow down. I mean, you start to slow down. You realize that you don't have to do everything at once, that perhaps you have to take what you have and sort of organize it all before moving into new territory. And so perhaps the best way of dealing with Sunday is just to finish things off, tie up loose ends, and perhaps make sure that you're not being bothered. You don't want to make things complicated for yourself on Sunday. The moon does make a square to Neptune, and the moon in Capricorn making a square to Neptune in Aries, and it just might be that there are things out there which could make things complicated if you were to ask questions, if you were to explore. Now, we're supposed to think that exploration is a good idea, that it's always good to know more, to learn more about the world. But maybe, Leo, that's not the case. If you ask questions, you'll get answers. If you do research, you'll get answers. But those answers just might create just extra problems, extra work, and so probably the best approach is as you move into Sunday, just to take what you have and don't try to introduce anything new. Instead, do what's in front of you and do it in a sort of a solid, sort of systematic kind of way, and that way you'll find that as you move into the new week, things should be fairly straightforward, and you will have perhaps done the necessary preparation. Virgo. Mercury is now going forward, and you're perhaps recognizing this fact. So Mercury went stationary direct a couple of days ago. I mean, it's still not moving, hardly moving, but perhaps you're getting the first signs of real movement. And you're starting to see what is possible, and that may say something about other people's attitudes and what other people are prepared to do and what they're prepared to say. So if you, for example, try to be sociable over the weekend, you might find that you get a response, perhaps more of a response than you got before, and this is additionally saying something about you. I mean, what you want is action. I mean, deep down, I think that's what you want. You want to be able to have an impact. You want to be able to, move through the world, be noticed, be listened to. But things do take their time. You can't expect everything to come together at once, especially now when we do have some rather difficult aspects, at least on Saturday. So on Saturday, we've got a T-square. So this T-square involves the Moon, Mars, and Venus. So the Moon in Sagittarius is making an opposition to Mars, and it's making a square to Venus, and there is something going on which could be irritating. I mean, I think we might see this in terms of the Moon and Mars, and in fact, true Black Moon Lilith, because the Moon is making a conjunction to true black moon Lilith, also making an opposition to Mars. And Virgo, part of you would just like to just exist. And I mean, you want action, but at the same time, you kind of feel that you can't fully do it because you're just not ready. And maybe this is also reflected by the fact that Mercury is still moving very, very, very slowly, having just gone stationary direct. And then, when you are in one place, when you're thinking, when you're contemplating, when you're perhaps, I don't know, meditating somewhere safe, that's perhaps when things start to happen. Moon conjunct true black moon Lilith. I think you become very aware of who you are, and also perhaps what you're capable of doing. I mean, true black moon Lilith is a powerful energy. It's a creative energy, but it's quite a dark energy, and so it could be that you're slightly worried about what would happen if you were to spread your wings, if you were really able to move around, make things happen. Maybe the situation would be difficult. You might start something and not be able to stop it. And so there is a cautious side to you, which you kind of find frustrating at the same time. And the moon is opposition Mars, and that Mars represents pressure, perhaps pressure from the outside world. You know that there is something you're expected to do, and if you are involved with other people, particularly people who have any form of power, then that's going to irritate you as well, because perhaps they're pushing you to do something that you're simply not ready to do. And so that might point to the need for some kind of negotiation, because Venus is, the moon is making a square to Venus, Venus is making a square to Mars, and Venus is if you like the key to the T square, because the moon is, so because Venus is making a square to both moon and Mars, those two planets in opposition. And so if you need to negotiate something, then I think you can. And that particularly applies if you're under pressure. So if you are under pressure from other people, particularly people who have some kind of real or imagined authority, your first inclination is just to see it as a conflict situation with winners and losers. But Venus is telling you that there is a way to negotiate around the problem, to come to a compromise, and you should trust yourself to get it right. You should trust yourself to stand up for your own interests, and also to listen, to try to give people what they want up to a point. And if you are looking for a compromise, I do think that it's very likely that you'll get there. So don't doubt yourself, and don't doubt your social and diplomatic skills. Now, the moon does change sign this weekend. It moves out of Sagittarius, and it moves into Capricorn. And when the moon moves into Capricorn, a lot of this pressure that I've been talking about is going to start to ease. I think that you're going to feel more relaxed and just more at home, at home with yourself, not feeling that you have to be so defensive. And, with moon in Capricorn, you may see just possibilities for doing things which are interesting and which make the most of what you are and what you've got, and do think about your your fundamental abilities, because you can make good use of them, not in a way that is necessarily dramatic, but if you are practical and you just decide that you'd like to do something, then on Sunday I think you can just get on with it, and I don't think there'll be much to get in your way. So I think the overall picture is perhaps that the weekend starts off as being quite complicated. There's quite a lot to deal with, and perhaps there are people to deal with as well, and there might be demands and expectations which you have to sort of confront and negotiate with. But by the end of the weekend, I think that things do simplify, and I think that you'll have a greater level of freedom. Libra. Venus is kind of in the thick of it, and of course Venus is your ruling planet, and what I mean is Venus is making a square to Mars, and it is also making a square to the moon. I mean, the moon is making a square to Venus, so we've got a T square. I mean, that is one of the big things going on this weekend, at least on Saturday. And with Venus square Mars, this square between Venus and Mars, is getting closer and closer. Early next week, Venus and Mars are exactly square. So when you think about Venus and Mars, that can be about a relationship, or how you get on with another person, and it just might be the case that you and someone else don't necessarily have a great deal in common. At least on Saturday you might not have a great deal in common. In fact, over the next few days you might not have a great deal in common. You can certainly see the conflict, and this conflict might be about you feeling that everything is sorted out, that you kind of know where things are going, and it appears to be straightforward, and then maybe someone else comes in with other ideas. They might find these ideas very exciting and interesting, and they might want to inflict these ideas onto you, and that might be the last thing you want to hear. That it's just something you just do not want to bother with, and it could be annoying. And right now, Libra, part of you just does want to keep a low profile. In fact, throughout the weekend, I think you're going to want to keep a fairly low profile. And, the last thing you want to do is make plans, fit in with someone else's plans, do what you're told, take risks, go places you've never been before. That's just absolutely not what you want. But at the same time, you're very aware that we live in a really quite exciting world. When I say exciting, I don't mean exciting in a good or a bad sense, just exciting. Things are excited, like it or not. And so you're aware of all this. You're aware that we do live in a world that is unstable, and you might even be sort of taking it personally. It might be having an impact on your balance. Remember, Libra is the sign of the scales, and right now, I think that your sense of balance is very fine-tuned. It's much more fine-tuned than usual. So if anything upsets that balance, you immediately pick up on it, and that goes back to the Venus square Mars. Someone suggesting something is just not what you want to hear. Someone behaving in a particular way is just not what you want to see, not what you want to experience. You would, in some respects, prefer to be left alone, but at the same time, you just know that this is the world in which you live, and as far as what you can do, it's just about being firm, restrained, and perhaps pointing things out. that perhaps other people just haven't seen. It just hasn't occurred to them, and so that might be the right approach. I don't know what's going on there with the dog. We've got 2 dogs now. So it has become a lot more complicated. So we've had this dog. She's going to turn. She's going to be 4 soon. Her birthday is soon, so she's a Leo. But we got another dog. I don't know whether that was a good idea, but the dog is small. It's the same breed. But we got a Pisces dog, which, I'm sure I'll be talking about the Pisces dog more. The Pisces dog is, just 4 months old, so that could be a bit of a nightmare. It certainly disturbs the balance, perhaps, having another dog, and something is disturbing her balance. And you, Libra, just may feel a bit disturbed by everything, and what is irritating you, what is making you want to bark, a threat. That's Venus square Mars, and Venus just wants to be left alone. But at the same time, it's a dangerous world and a complicated world out there, and you're watching, you're noticing, and you're ready to respond. And one other thing going on over the weekend is the fact that we have got Saturn going retrograde. So on Sunday it happens, and I think that Saturn retrograde does matter to you because Saturn is in Aries, so Saturn is in your opposite sign, and it might well say something about another person. Another person may be in a process of change. They might have been moving in a particular direction, slowly but surely. And Saturn has been moving quite quickly recently. It's gone through half of the sign Aries since February the 14th. So February the 14th, it entered Aries, and now it's almost at 15 degrees Aries, so Saturn seemed to be going really quickly, but now it's come to a standstill, and it might be that someone important has changed their mind about something, or you thought they were going in a particular direction, and then if you're open to their movement, perhaps they have been slowing down recently. But additionally, it's not just about whether something is going forward or backwards. The point is Saturn has come to a standstill. And so when a planet comes to a standstill, it might be extra strong. It doesn't go away now. So, if you look at an ephemeris, you'll see that Saturn is just not moving. So it might be that someone is not moving. They're not going away. Maybe you want them to go away, but their presence is just constant. It doesn't change, and that presence could be oppressive. You want to be in control, but maybe just someone has a constant influence on you that it might be difficult to describe. But it might not be such a bad influence. It might be necessary. Mercury is square Saturn right now. So in fact, we've got Mercury at a standstill. We've got Saturn at a standstill, and Mercury and Saturn are in square to one another. And so that might be about you feeling that you want to move forward with something. That's what you want to do. But at the same time, you have to deal with someone else's influence. It's kind of holding you back, and that might bother you. But the thing is, Mercury doesn't ever make this square to Saturn. So if you do feel that you're being held back, particularly by another person, don't worry. Mercury is moving forward. Mercury is not going to make that square to Saturn. So it might be a worry or even a threat that is just not going to be realized. So it's important not to feel oppressed, and to realize that actually you have a lot of freedom, and you're going to have a lot more freedom. Look at Venus. Venus might be in Virgo, but next month, early next month, fairly early next month, Venus moves into Libra, and when Venus moves into Libra, you'll really be able to be yourself. And in fact, there's a grand trine involving Venus, Uranus, and Pluto, and that's going to be really exciting. And that's all happening next month. So if things are a bit slow, Libra, don't worry, because soon enough things will gather pace. Scorpio. The issue of money might crop up, perhaps. I'm thinking particularly of on Saturday. I mean, the moon is moving through Sagittarius, and the moon in Sagittarius, it does make a square to Mars, and square to Mars? No, opposition to Mars. It makes an opposition to Mars and a square to Venus. And so if on Saturday, particularly on Saturday, if you get involved with money, or you have to be involved with money, or the issue of money crops up, it might just annoy you. It's not something that you want to have to deal with, but it might be something that you just have to be aware of. And the moon additionally is making a conjunction to true black moon Lilith in Sagittarius, and that might be the old thing about money being the root of all evil, or certainly money can be the root of just plain complications. I think people sometimes underestimate the power of money. They think, money is not everything. You can't be happy without. You don't need money to be happy, and so forth. But it's not true. I think that money does matter, and I think you're very aware of the fact that money matters. So if money does crop up over the weekend, especially on Saturday, don't be dismissive. And are you going to be dismissive? I mean, Scorpios are not dismissive as a sign, as a rule. And one aspect we do have this weekend, perhaps the most important aspect, is a sesquiquadrate between Mars and Pluto. So Mars is in Gemini, and it's making an 135-degree aspect to Pluto. So that just says something about your whole stance, throughout the weekend. You are inclined to look after yourself. You understand that it is a bit of a struggle, and it might be a struggle in terms of just other people, who has control, who's deciding on the agenda, what is holding you back, and what should you be doing about it. And it's happening at the same time as a sextile between Neptune and Pluto. So this Neptune-Pluto sextile, which has been around on and off since the middle of the 20th century, so it just doesn't go away. This Neptune-Pluto sextile, but it does impact you. So you can see part of how it impacts you, because Mars makes a sesquiquadrate to Pluto, but because Neptune is making is making a sextile to Pluto, that impacts you doubly. But we can't see it on a regular chart. We have to look at a 12th harmonic chart to see how Neptune and Pluto are operating. So the aspects I'm thinking about is the fact that in terms of Mars and Neptune, Mars and Neptune are making an aspect, are making a, to put it in the jargon, they are making a 24th harmonic conjunction. So when we say 24th harmonic, you think about what is the number 24 about? So a 12th of the circle is 30 degrees. A 24th of the circle is 15 degrees. So it's a 15-degree series aspect. So 15 degrees. What is 15 degrees before Mars? Well, it's Mars is at 19 degrees 6. 15 degrees before that is 4 degrees 6 Gemini, and then you run that through, and then you see that Neptune is at 4 degrees, Mars is at 19 degrees. So that means that there's a 15 degree aspect there, or a 15 degree series aspect, and we can see this on the 12th harmonic. So if we set up a 12th harmonic chart, I'll show you what I mean. So there it is. So on the 12th harmonic chart, we have our conjunction between Neptune and Pluto. So a sextile on the 24th harmonic, on the 12th harmonic, is shown as a conjunction, and there is our 15 degree aspect. 15 degree aspects on the 12th harmonic are shown as opposition. So Mars is making an opposition to Neptune and Pluto. So we've already discussed Mars opposition Pluto, but then Mars opposition Neptune. It seems that you are grappling with some higher level force represented by Neptune and Pluto. So Neptune and Pluto together, they just say something about the world in which we're living, because pretty much all of us are born with a Neptune-Pluto sextile. And so this tells us about people, the world, society, and you're trying to get to grips with it, and you're trying to make your presence felt. And it's not easy, but it's certainly possible. Mars is moving. Okay, so Mars at 19, on the 12th harmonic is at 19 Scorpio. So it's applying to the opposition of Neptune and Pluto, and this is particularly happening on Sunday. And so, yes, you feel a certain powerlessness, but there are things you really want to do, and there are things you want to get in touch with as well. And so you perhaps have the impetus here to really get to grips with the fundamental cause of everything, to understand what's motivating other people, what's motivating society, and then the question is, what do you need to do to put yourself in a situation where you are in control? And so, I know that it all sounds a bit heavy and sort of abstract, but you're a Scorpio. You probably know more about these things than me. You might not use the kind of wordings and explanations I use. Sometimes I do explain too much. I'm kind of into telling rather than showing. That can be my fault. But I do think that it is. I do think that it is a powerful weekend, and I would just urge you to really, get in touch with that Neptune-Pluto energy. And while you're at it, do consider what impact you're having on other people, because this weekend we do have a Venus square Mars. The exact Venus square Mars is in fact early next week, but the moon is triggering it. So there's Mars, that's your ruler. It's moving. Venus is moving to a square of Mars, and the moon is opposition Mars, particularly on Saturday. So that could suggest conflict, as I've perhaps already indicated. And it just kind of occurs to you, Scorpio, that perhaps you and someone close to you are just not seeing eye to eye, and there could be some kind of disagreement. And as I've already indicated, it could be a disagreement that relates to money, or how money is used. But it just could be something else. And as a Scorpio, you value your privacy, and you appreciate your own power. You want to have your own power. You want to maintain your own power. And it just could be that someone else is kind of a bother. And just, it's important, Scorpio, that you don't exaggerate, that you don't you don't feel that it's all about someone else's fault, or you feel that it's a hopeless situation. I think you just need to use your Scorpio sensitivity to understand what is going on. But also, I think it is very important that you look after your own interests. Sagittarius. The weekend starts with the moon moving through your sign, and so through Saturday, the moon is moving through Sagittarius, and so that is, I would have said, pretty positive, because when we talked about yesterday, Friday, we talked about a grand trine in fire signs. I titled yesterday's video, what was it, On Fire. I think things could have been on fire, but in a positive sense. Things were moving. There was energy, there was excitement, and the question then is, where is all this excitement going? There is some danger that the excitement just gets frittered away. The grand trine starts to break up, and the excitement goes away, and you forget what it was all about, and what appeared to be a great opportunity gets lost. And so the final stage of this grand trine is the moon moving. Okay, it makes a trine to the sun, Jupiter. It makes a trine to Neptune. This all happened yesterday, but as you moved into the weekend, the moon makes a trine to Saturn. And I would have seen Saturn as being quite a fortunate influence. Saturn allows you to get yourself together, to make things permanent if you want them to be permanent. So if you have been involved in something, now is a time to make it real, and perhaps to create structures whereby it can continue. And so I think that the moon trine Saturn really could be quite constructive. Yet there are other things going on, and the moon in late Sagittarius does make an opposition to Mars. It also makes a conjunction to true black moon Lilith, and it makes a square to Venus. But as far as this moon Mars conjunction is concerned, I think that could be about friction. It could be about a relationship not necessarily going where you had planned. Maybe because someone is being stubborn, perhaps represented by Mars and Gemini. Someone has other ideas which might not be in accord with your own approach. And as far as you yourself are concerned, you have real individuality. Moon conjunct true black moon Lilith. You could say that with moon conjunct true black moon Lilith in Sagittarius, you get a real feel for who you are and what is motivating you, and you can sort of get in touch with those creatures, or the creature like Lilith, this being hanging around in the shadows, but sort of represents something that is very important to you and who you are. So you're quite firm in terms of your individuality and what is important to you. But then opposition Mars, there is some danger there that there is a conflict. There's a difference of opinion. And with true black moon Lilith opposition Mars, I've been talking about projection a lot recently. Maybe I've been talking about it too much, but when we talk about projection, it's about seeing things in oneself in other people, and perhaps blaming other people for what we have within ourselves. And so with true black moon Lilith conjunct moon opposition Mars, it's possible that your own true black moon Lilith, your own darkness, your creative darkness, is expressed by others. So you see other people doing things that you don't like, you don't approve of, but really this is a reflection of you. So if you find yourself getting annoyed with someone, or even feeling quite indignant about them, do ask yourself, what exactly is going on. Now, Venus is making a square to Mars. Moon is making a square to Venus. We have on Saturday a T square, and this Venus, to my mind, represents a solution. So, if you find yourself involved in some kind of conflict that people have, I don't know, disagreements with one another, there are incompatibilities. The solution might be to just be practical, rather than just get involved in an argument or to regard yourself as being in a situation that is insoluble. Instead, just do what is necessary. Do what you would like to do. Just be nice about it as well. Venus in Virgo, Venus in a high-profile part of your chart. It might just be about just making a change. Venus in Virgo can be about a change of appearance, a change of style. You tell yourself that you're not going to just stay in one place. You're just going to resolve a dispute by going somewhere else. Perhaps if you have the opportunity, do some work, make some money. If you have that kind of opportunity, but a change of scene could make a big difference. And additionally, with Venus square Mars, Moon square Venus, if you make a special effort to be pleasant and to superficially give in if there is an argument. Superficially, why by superficially? That means just doing something nice, trying to make someone happy, even if you disagree with them, even if you're having an argument with them, even if they really bother you. You just make that special effort, and in fact, it might make a huge difference. And in general, Sagittarius, your ability to get on with people over the weekend, not just Saturday but Sunday as well, is actually very good. And so if you are able to use your charms, then I think you can solve all sorts of problems, and you won't have to give anything away. Capricorn. Saturn is your ruling planet, and this weekend Saturn goes stationary retrograde. It comes to a standstill, and Saturn will be going retrograde until December. Now, recently, looking at the year overall, Saturn was making good progress. It was in February, on February the 14th, that Saturn moved into Aries, and it quickly moved through the first half of Aries, and now Saturn has got to 1445 Aries, so it's gone through half of a sign, but that's enough. Saturn is now coming to a standstill, and that might be how you feel. I know that you've perhaps just recovered from Mercury going retrograde, but now you've got Saturn. Now you've got Saturn to think about. Now that might sound like a problem, Saturn going retrograde. It's maybe not what you wanted to hear, but you could say that with Saturn going retrograde, you have a chance to go over old ground. Perhaps if you look back to what's been going on since February, you may have been quite pleased with some of your progress, but perhaps there have been other areas where things haven't necessarily worked. There may be things that are half finished, and so now might be a time to just take a step back, and perhaps it won't be until December. I think is it December the 10th, is it, that Saturn goes direct? I looked it up, but I've forgotten. I think it's December the 10th that Saturn goes direct. Yeah. So what happens is that Saturn goes back as far as it goes back as far as 755. It goes back as far as 756 Aries, and yeah, it goes direct on. I think it's the 10th. Yeah. On the on the 10th or the 11th of December. And so, yeah, it might not be such a bad thing that you have a chance to review. So if you have been planning on making some sort of major initiative, I mean, I'm not talking about sort of anything short term, but some big initiative, big move, then, yeah, maybe it won't be until the end of the year that you really have a chance to move forward with it. Okay, you could move forward with it now, but perhaps you, being a sensible Capricorn, you'll just prefer to just wait, and that is okay. So what I'm saying is, don't be frustrated by Saturn going retrograde. It's not anything that's going to be destructive. It certainly needn't be destructive, and in fact, you could argue that right now, with Saturn at a standstill, Saturn is extra powerful. Now, I mean, I know that there are systems that give negative points to a planet because they're retrograde or stationary, because they're not moving very fast. But the point is that planet is making its influence felt in a very constant and persistent way, and it's not moving. And that might give you positional power. So where you are, you don't move from where you are, and the longer you stay there, the more powerful you are, and people just cannot ignore you. So it's not necessarily such a bad thing. And just before Saturn goes retrograde, the moon makes a trine to Saturn. So yesterday I was talking about a grand trine in fire signs, and the sun was making a conjunction to Jupiter, moon was making a trine to the sun and Jupiter, moon was making a trine to Neptune. So there was a lot of sort of activity there with that grand trine in fire signs, but Saturn was not involved because Saturn was in later degrees than the sun and Jupiter and Neptune. But now the moon moves on and makes a trine to Saturn. So that's how the weekend starts, with a trine. And that trine between moon and Saturn is quite subtle. It's not like anything dramatic or immediate is going to sort of take place, but it's like you have the last word. There was something that you perhaps didn't have full control over, or didn't seem that you had full control over, but as the moon comes to the trine, you could perhaps take a situation which you didn't fully understand, and it suddenly becomes clear to you, and you are able to stabilize it. And in general, I think you are at the moment quite a stabilizing influence, and really, there isn't much more to be said except for the fact that on Sunday, the moon does move into Capricorn. It does move into your sign. So so as Saturn comes to a standstill, you have moon in Capricorn, and so with moon in Capricorn, that's a good place to be. So Sunday, Monday, new week. The moon allows you to further stabilize the situation, and you don't need huge amounts of movement. You're looking for understanding and a degree of control. It's true that the moon does make a square to Neptune, but I don't think that moon square Neptune need be too much of an issue. I mean, there may be something sort of at home which you don't fully understand, that kind of needs to be resolved. And maybe when the moon moves into Capricorn, some domestic issue or a domestic malfunction, there may be a way of dealing with it. Although if you're thinking about Neptune, you might be thinking about water, and but moon square Neptune is a pretty common aspect. It's pretty regular aspect. So I don't think you can say moon square Neptune equals water damage, but instead it might be just quite constructive. Just Neptune in Aries, you become aware of something that isn't entirely right at home, something confusing, something that is difficult to fix, maybe. But maybe Moon in Capricorn gives you the good sense and focus to be able to deal with it effectively. Aquarius. So Aquarius, you and Capricorn both have the same ruler, and your ruler is Saturn. And I was saying to Capricorn that Saturn was stationary retrograde, and it's kind of a similar message for you, because your ruling planet has come to a standstill, and that might sound rather grim, but it's not. It's not grim at all. I mean, Saturn is retrograde for quite a lot of the time, and Saturn goes stationary retrograde this weekend. It stays retrograde until December the 10th or the 11th, so almost until Christmas. Saturn is retrograde, and so with Saturn going retrograde, it might be, Aquarius, that there are things that need to be just reconsidered over the next few months, indeed between now and the end of the year. Perhaps you thought you'd understood something, you thought you'd worked it all out, and now you have to look at it again, and it just might be just the natural flow. So you have the Saturn moving forward. This is about progress, covering new ground. Then it goes retrograde, and that's all about going back over what you have achieved, looking at things again, and perhaps reviewing things. And so since February the 15th, when Saturn went into February the 14th, when Saturn went into Aries, since then Saturn has covered half a sign. It's moved from 0 degrees Aries to nearly 15 degrees Aries. And so I'm thinking, Aquarius, that there has been quite a lot you've covered, but maybe you just need to just pause, go over it again, make sure it's all been done as well as possible. And if you've got any huge plans, then it may be best to wait until the end of the year or even the beginning of next year before you put them into practice. So you don't have to do everything at once. And as far as this weekend is concerned, we've just come off this grand trine in fire signs, which I was very enthusiastic about. This grand trine in fire signs, it looked like quite an exciting configuration. And this grand trine did not involve Saturn to begin with, because it took place very early in Sagittarius. The grand trine was in the first 10 degrees or less of Sagittarius, and of course, and Saturn is at 1445 Sagittarius. But early on Saturday, the moon makes a trine to Saturn, and so when the moon makes a trine to Saturn, it's like you become involved with the grand trine. And so maybe in the end you arrive at the party, or in the end you have a realization, you see how something does involve you, and it's inclusive. And I think that you recognize that you really are part of things. You don't have to feel separate, although right now with Saturn at an absolute standstill, I mean, it is Saturn from the Earth's perspective is not moving. You might feel different. It might feel that just everything has stopped, that everything has just ground to a halt. And that's potentially quite a good thing, because it gives you a power and a control that's been, I think, building up for a few weeks, but now it's here, and you can definitely have an influence. And I think that people are going to take notice of you right now, and it's perhaps all about Aquarius giving a constant message. If you've been saying the same thing over and over again, or even if you haven't been saying anything, you've been demonstrating the same thing. You haven't stopped, you haven't given up, and now perhaps you are being recognized. People can't help but notice you. You are just there all the time. You're just a permanent feature of the landscape. And okay, to begin with, you might not be doing much, but your permanence just cannot be denied. And this means that you have a power. Perhaps it's quite a passive power, but it is a very real power, which I think this weekend you can exercise. Now, one aspect that should be considered, I mean, it's a very otherworldly aspect, is a sextile between Neptune and Pluto. So Pluto is, of course, now in Aquarius. As far as the Neptune sextile Pluto is concerned, well, this aspect has been going on forever, since the middle of the 20th century. Probably everyone listening to this, I would think that everyone listening to me has got Neptune sextile Pluto in their chart. But now this next Neptune sextile Pluto is relevant to you, because Pluto's in Aquarius, and so Neptune is making an exact sextile to your Pluto, and so the Neptune sextile Pluto it is quite difficult to conceptualize, but it just might be about your awareness. With Neptune in Aries, there are things you are starting to understand about the collective, which maybe you hadn't fully understood before, but now it's really becoming very clear, and you can just see where things are heading, where things are going, and you can almost find the words for it. I mean, it's difficult to find the words, because me trying to describe Neptune sextile Pluto to you, it's not easy. It's an aspect that I probably don't feel entirely comfortable about explaining. It is one of the more difficult ones, even though one has to deal with it all the time. Whenever I set up charts, at the time when you used to have to do your horoscopes by hand, always you had to fill out the aspect column, and always in the Neptune and Pluto box you always put that sextile. And so I've been dealing with this sextile for over 40 years, ever since I got into astrology. But it is real, and you have an opportunity to really think about what this sextile means, and how you can put it into practice, because it is its relevance is that with Pluto in Aquarius, you're in a position to create change, and you can almost be the one who draws down the transformative energy of the universe and puts it into practice. And Neptune certainly has a way of helping, and perhaps it helps you communicate something in the end, even if you can't necessarily find the words to describe it right now. Pisces, we have the moon still in Sagittarius. At least on Saturday, the moon is in Sagittarius. It's moving through sort of late Sagittarius, and it starts the weekend making a trine to Saturn, and that moon trine Saturn, as far as you're concerned, Pisces, I think is pretty useful. It allows you to get things together, perhaps to take things which are a bit chaotic, a bit disorganized, but you're able to create some kind of structure with Moon trine Saturn. It might not be something you're used to doing, but I think you understand the importance of just knowing where things are, and making sure that things haven't been left to chance. And then the Moon moves on, and we do have an opposition to Mars and a square to Venus. So Moon opposition Mars, it could be Pisces, certainly on Saturday, that there are things you want to get together. You know that you haven't got all the time in the world, so it's best to get on and do what you need to do. But Moon opposition Mars might be resistance. Resistance that just comes from perhaps just having to deal with things. It is a weekend. Perhaps you're going to be spending more time than usual at home, and so if you're spending time at home, there are things happening that have to be dealt with, that can't be ignored, and they just may slow you down, and that might be somewhat annoying, and you kind of want more space. You want the freedom to do what is important to you, but perhaps you feel that you're not necessarily getting at freedom. And the Moon is also making a square to Venus, and with Venus in Virgo, and that can be annoying. Certain people can be annoying. People just don't want to be ignored, and you have to pay them some attention, and it's perhaps the absolute last thing you want to do. But don't think that everyone is a problem. If you've got something that's bothering you, if you are stuck, you're not quite sure which way to go, it could be but by getting some support and advice from another person, it could make all the difference. Because Venus is in Virgo, your opposite sign, and it's easy to see Venus as a problem, to see certain people as a problem. But if you give people a chance, then I think that it could be a very different situation. It could be a situation that works for you, rather than against you. So if you do feel a bit blocked on Saturday, a bit angry as well, don't think that it is a situation that is insoluble. I mean, I think there are solutions. And those solutions might be all about how you relate to others. And in general, Pisces, if you do make the effort, I think that your social skills are actually really good. So if you want to be nice, Pisces, you very much can be, and it'll actually be really very easy. And one aspect we have, which I need to just at least mention, is the fact that we've got a sextile between Neptune and Pluto, and this sextile between Neptune and Pluto, is exact, and this sextile, it does go exact every now and then. The sextile itself is completely unexceptional for our generation, because Neptune is always sextile Pluto. Certainly been sextile. Neptune Pluto has been sextile since the middle of the 20th century. But this sextile kind of has some relevance to you, because Pisces is on the midpoint. So Pluto is in Aquarius, which is the sign before Pisces. Neptune is in Aries, which is a sign after Pisces. So you could say, Pisces on the Neptune midpoint, Pluto-Neptune midpoint, is perhaps you really pick up on it more than most other signs. You're aware that something is going on. Something has been going on for a long time. Neptune wants to dissolve. But Pluto wants to perhaps hold on. And so there is a real tension between those two planets, and you perhaps are more familiar with this tension than perhaps other people. So it's about moving beyond yourself, but at the same time maintaining your fundamental power. And this might also link with the fact that the North Node is still in Pisces. It's now at 0 degrees 4 minutes Pisces. So the North Node is getting ready to move into Aquarius, but it's still there. And so this Neptune-Pluto sextile might just give you an extra insight into your own power and what you need to do to exercise this power. And, it is quite complicated. I mean, it's complicated from my perspective. I've got my sun in Gemini, but perhaps for you, Pisces, you have a better understanding of the dynamics of this sextile, and I think that you can really sort of utilize it in terms of increasing your influence, and also remembering that the North Node is in Pisces, to be doing something which is just fundamentally in accord with who you are. And that's it. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to turn to the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is the weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 21, which is biting through. So this hexagram 21 is about punishment, and perhaps it's about reform as well. If someone is doing something wrong, then what do we do? How do we resolve the issue? How do we make sure that someone behaves? And we may be talking about another person, or it could be us ourselves. Perhaps we haven't got it together, and we need to give ourselves a talking to. Just tell ourselves that it's just, it's not good enough. It could be better. So that's perhaps what we're thinking, as we move into the weekend. Now, this hexagram, it has a single moving line. It has a moving line at the bottom, and that moving line at the bottom is about the first offense. So the I Ching tells us that if you've got a first offense, you're not quite so harsh about it. The punishment isn't so massive, of course, unless the first offence is for, I don't know, murder or something like that. But some minor infraction, one doesn't want to sort of put someone in prison and throw away the key. And so it talks about a small punishment, or even just a warning. And it talks about the toes being put in some kind of constraint, so one's not sort of imprisoning the whole body. It's just one's toes, because the bottom line in the hexagram is the toes, and so one just has to just make an adjustment. We know that perhaps we're doing something wrong, or someone else is doing something wrong, and we give a warning. We warn ourselves, or perhaps we warn someone else, and it's likely that's enough. And once that has been resolved, this small problem, I think it could be our own problem. We know we're not getting it right, and we just have to bite through the hard leather of our own intransigence to find the gold underneath. And that allows us to move to a second hexagram. And once we've done that, and that second hexagram is hexagram number 35, which is progress. So it does actually look like being an okay weekend. There's just some small thing that has to be dealt with. Someone's got something wrong. Maybe us, maybe someone else, but it's not a big deal at this stage. And once a problem is sorted out, we definitely get progress and we are moving forward. And even this I Ching even talks about getting 3 audiences, because our reputation is spreading. I don't know whether that's literally 3 audiences. I mean, it is a weekend. People don't get job interviews, for example, over the weekend. Usually, I don't think. But we can certainly attract attention, in a fortunate way. And I think that we can boost our respect and, show that, we are a worthy person who can be trusted. And that's it. That's all I've got to say. I hope you have a great weekend, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again very soon.